I wanted today to share a little bit about two of my favorite brushes. I got these brushes, these are little Chinese um, calligraphy brushes. I got them last year and I use them all the time. So, what's fun about these brushes is they're not particularly expensive, but they're made out of natural fibers. And they allow me a variety of different brush strokes, but all within the same body of a single brush. So they're fun to experiment with. They um, provide a lot of flexibility, and they're not particularly expensive for the pleasure of getting to use them. So I've set things up, and I wanted to play with them. I got them from a place called, see if you can read it. You probably can't. Inkston, like an ink stone, but without an E. So Inkston. Inkston is an online store. They sell brushes that are made in China and ship them around the world. So they're neat place, and everything's handmade and all that good stuff. But the brushes are just something I'm not able to get from a domestic purveyor. So for whatever that's worth, that's where it's getting. I'll provide a link on the blog, and people, if they want to shop for them, can try them out too. So the brushes provide, they can a lot of different shapes. If you can see that, unlike a quill, which comes to a point, right? There's that little point. And has a super fat belly. The calligraphy brush is actually a flat. They've chopped off the end of the brush. And you can see it's very skinny on the other end. This allows me, of course, to make marks that are very similar to a flat. So I have here a flat, which I use from time to time. We're going to look at it. But if I round it out, I can get a mark. I can rotate the brush and get it to come to something similar to a point. And the little point is definitely similar to a round in terms of its function. And yet, of course, the brush is made out of natural fibers like a mop would be. So it carries more water than a round would, and can make the kind of expressive marks that a mop can make when we splay the bristles and such. But it doesn't hold as much water as a mop does. So a mop can do a wash really well, and this doesn't do a wash as well. But it does hold more water than a round does. So it's an interesting combination of brushes. It allows me the expressive marks and some of the water retention qualities of a mop, which uses a natural hair. It allows me some of the rounded qualities of a round, which comes to a point, and yet also it holds less water than a mop. So it also allows me for some sort of density to my brush marks, and not everything is being totally flooded with water the way that a mop sometimes can be. And yet also, if I flatten it out proactively, it's really easy to make a thin, narrow line the way that a flat does. So something that you could almost never get with a mop. So let's take a look at how it works, and we'll go from there. Of course, they come in a variety of sizes. I prefer this size generally, but I also use this size, which can make really interesting expressive marks like a mop, but it doesn't hold very much water because it's a smaller brush. So it allows me to sort of charge the color in more completely when I'm painting. And sometimes a mop dilutes the pigment too much. And then, it does what it does really well. It floods the space with water and holds it inside the body of the brush the whole time. So I'm just mixing up a little ultramarine blue and burnt sienna, and bring it in. There we go. And I'm just going to show you some of the marks that it can make. So let's first explore the flat. Here you can see in the palette, or maybe you can't see it very well, but I'm flattening the brush out. So it's very wide on one side and very skinny on the other. And if I I can definitely get a long, thin line easily, right? Of course, you can do this with the round as well, but it's harder. Um, and I can also turn it the other way, and I get a wide, flat line. Um, and if I want to like brush the belly down farther, I capture a lot of the texture of the paper, which is really nice. And it also holds more water than a flat does. A flat doesn't hold very much water because it's very flat and narrow. It doesn't have much of a belly, and the fibers are synthetic. And sometimes that's the quality that you want. Maybe I'm softening an edge with water, and I don't want to flood the brush mark that I've made with too much water. I can use a flat to do that, and it'll do a really nice job because it'll be very delicate with releasing water, and it won't hold very much water. But sometimes I want a little more water in the brush, and this definitely allows me the ability to do that. Additionally, it obviously can act like a round. So here's, by the way, let's compare, marks. Get this flat loaded just to show you, the flat. Does similar things. But this also can act like a round. So if I grab some of the pigment and we mix it up, here's the round and the belly of the round, right? And it has this little point at the end. With this brush, if I want it to act like a round, I can kind of curl the shape of the brush, and it'll come to more of a point. It's like a blunt point. It's definitely more round than it was, and it is it's not acting exactly like a flat the way it was before. The bristles, since they're natural, are very flexible, and they allow us to mold it into different shapes. So now it's much easier for me to go in a variety of directions and have it act something similar to a round, which is nice. I've changed the shape of the brush, and of course I can still get these super delicious, very flexible bristles to do what I want in terms of providing a variety of brush strokes. And I get just a little bit more of the bristles showing in the mark, right? There's just a little more flexibility in the strokes. There's little areas where I'm getting little bristle marks. These are harder to get. You can capture texture with a synthetic round if you want to, right? I can press the belly down, and if the brush is not overly full, I'll get some texture. But I have to really work at it a little bit more than I do with this Chinese calligraphy brush, which really just is fantastic at making dry brush marks. And of course, there's the mop. So I'm using here a recab mop. I'm not particular about brands per se. I recently picked up a Da Vinci, and it is a fantastic mop. Just a gorgeous, fantastic mop with a long point, very similar to an Alvaro Castanet kind of mop. Just to say, right, his mops have long points, and this has a nice long point also. I like that about it. So with a mop like this, of course, it's easy to flood the paper and make a big wash, have it be very smooth, and it does a fantastic job of this. It would be harder to do with a round. Of course, you could do it with a round if you had to, but it's easier with this tool. The tool is almost designed specifically to do that. And of course, with a mop, if I want to make bristly brush strokes, I got to dry it, and then I can get all of this texture on the page. It does a good job of that. But sometimes the problem with mops is that they carry too much moisture. So you can see here the mop is been shifted in shape. It's a natural fiber. It's doing all the stuff that mops do. It's really lovely. And then if I grab the Chinese calligraphy brush, and I mix up a nice mixture of pigment also, and I grab a lot of water. Just to say, it also carries a lot of water in it if I want to, if I get the belly wet. And it can make a pretty easy, it can make a nice substitute for a mop for certain shapes as well. Um, and it does a nice job of that. And if I want to splay the bristles and get really interesting brush marks such as these, I can. These would be almost impossible to get with a round. A round can capture texture, but it does require more work. So what's fun about this brush is that I'm able to make the marks that I can get from a flat. And here you can see I've made it a flat again, and with ease. And I can get the marks that I can get with a round if I rotate the brush and bring it to a point. And I'm able to make it work a bit like a mop, where I have these super flexible, really splayed out bristles, and I can do a lot of things that are harder to do with a round. And all of this comes in a single brush. So the truth is, I'm normally nowadays, I use the mops that I have. I use a bigger mop. If I'm going to wet the paper, or I'm going to do a big wash, or all of those preliminary phases, I totally still use a mop. It's the best tool for that phase. And at the end of a painting, I'll use a round, either a round like this or a very small synthetic round. It carries even less water. And I'm going to turn this over so we can see the shapes of things better. I'll use a round or a little small round, like that's maybe 1/8 of an inch thick at the ferrule. And that does its job very well. It's got a sharp point. It doesn't splay. It bounces back. It keeps its shape. It doesn't hold much water. It does all the things that it's supposed to do really, really well. But in the middle of the painting, I am often using these Chinese brushes to create the kinds of strokes that I would be using if I was alternating between a synthetic round and a mop. Because it does both of those things really well. And every once in a while I need to cut a hard edge, maybe some sort of straight edge, and it does a pretty good job of replicating the needs of the marks of a flat. So I have this size here. This one is 601 WS, and this one is 603 WS. And I'll provide, like I said, the link to the store online where people can buy these. I think they got this two of them for $20 or something like that. But they're just marvelous. And it is worth saying, much like how I might have a certain sized synthetic round, this one is a Perla, an Escoda Perla 12, and I'll have an Escoda Perla, I think it's a 6. And I'll have one for making smaller marks, of course, and one for making bigger marks. But also the smaller one holds less water, provides a denser mark that's often diluted with less water. And similarly, to have this second Chinese calligraphy brush and to be able to gather my pigment and then apply it, it often does it with a greater density of pigment because it's not holding as much in it. It's much easier to get it to stay dry and not flood an area when I'm working with it. So anyways, I don't see a lot of people using these. I think they're fantastic. They're super fun. They make a lot of fantastic marks. And if people were to buy these brushes, wonderful. Thank you to Inkston for producing them and making them available to us here in the US. And that's it for now. Thanks for viewing, and have a fun time making marks. Bye-bye.